Hi everyone, and welcome to week 5 of our Hometown Charm Sew Along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website ilovetomakequilts.com. This week's theme is holiday celebrations. Tell me down in the comments what some of your hometown holiday celebrations are and why you enjoy them. If you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, link in the description below, grab your free pattern, come back here and I'll show you how to do it. As always folks, you can see here that I have all of my pieces cut out as per the pattern directions, except for the flying geese section, which once again I will be doing 4 at a time. I'm going to set the pieces we don't need right now aside and start with the corner blocks, first sewing the 2 smaller squares together and then sewing them to the large rectangle. Let's go. With the small squares sewn together, I'm now just going to cut these apart, give them a quick finger press and sew them to the rectangle. The corner unit's done now, it's time to move on to the flying geese. Because there are 4 in this pattern, I am choosing to do it again, the 4 at a time method. It's just my preferred method, but you can make your flying geese in any way, shape or form you please. I wasn't prepared ahead of time, so I need to draw a diagonal line on my 4 small blocks, take 2 of them and lay them diagonally across my large block and sew 1/4 of an inch either side of that drawn line. With the first part of our flying geese unit now sewn, we need to cut it along the drawn line, and I am going to give everything a press now before placing the remaining small squares onto the flying geese units and once again sewing 1/4 of an inch either side of that drawn line. Now that we've sewn our last 2 lines of stitching on the flying geese units, we once again slice them down the drawn line and press them out before trimming. I'm going to show you one example of each of both ways of trimming down the flying geese when you're doing the 4 at a time. First of all, with the Ultimate Flying Geese tool from Creative Grids. This tool is very handy. It has a reference chart over to the left of the ruler which tells you which guideline to follow for trimming down, and it's a simple case of lining this one up with the peak, trimming those 2 sides, rotating both the block and the tool, and trimming the final 2 sides using the same guidelines. And as I showed you last week, we can also trim these down using a standard quilting ruler. In my case, I have my 6.5 inch. What I was showing you there was that the base of the block is still a straight line, as that is an outside edge of your previously cut large square. What you need to do is take a reference from that bottom, because we know it's straight. Make sure that you have 1/4 of an inch above the peak And as this is a 4.5 inch unfinished flying geese unit, we set the 2.25 inch mark at the peak, and we know then that we can trim those two sides. Simply rotate the piece, line up the 4.5 and the 2.5 lines on the outside, and trim the final two sides, and you're done. I'll get the rest of those finished, and we'll be back to put the final pieces together before we can construct the block. One final part of the block to make before we can head to completion, and that is attaching our leftover rectangle piece to the flying geese unit. In my case, I have flipped the medium and the light fabrics, so whichever fabric you're using, it should match the sky piece to your geese. All that's left to do now is lay out all the pieces we've just constructed in the 9-patch fashion and sew the block together, first doing all the vertical seams and then finally the 2 horizontal seams, as we do with all 9-patch units. Most of the intersections on the block should automatically nest, but for those that don't, just shift them in the direction you like, and before pressing, give the seam a little clip. While pinning this together to nest the seams to sew the first horizontal, I noticed that I had some excess fabric and that I didn't quite get my edges matched up on this piece here. So I'm just going to quickly take out those stitches, re-sew that seam and get back to business. As we've been going through this process, you would have seen me clip a few of the seams just to control which way the seam allowance is going. This allows me to get precision points, and I have gone through it in detail in past videos. Look through my back catalogue and you'll have all the clip the seam tips you'll ever need. Thanks again everyone for joining me this week. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen and found it useful. Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't done so already, why don't you consider subscribing to my channel? It's free. Hit the little notification bell and you won't miss a thing. I'll see you all again next week.